Walnut Grove Baptist Church Northstar service. We are recovering together. Northstar is a place where people come to recover from all types of hurts, habits, and hangups. We meet together Friday night here in the gym at 6:30. We also meet Wednesday nights at 6:30. We are a group that has, again, hurts, habits, and hangups. We are working on recovering together, and that means connecting to God. It means learning to connect to one another, and it means connecting back to ourselves and who God has us to be. We follow the 12 steps, and that first one is admit we're powerless. We reach out to God. And the song that we're about to sing, Here I Am to Worship, it really brings that back to home. Call upon the name of the Lord and be saved. It's the first thing we have to do if we're going to recover, if we're going to be the people that God has us to be, if we're going to let him take away our pain. We have to call on his name and be saved. He's the light of the world. He steps down into our darkness, and he opens our eyes, and he lets us see. And that's really what Northstar is all about. It's what a relationship in God is all about. It's certainly what we are trying to do at Northstar, is let God open our eyes and let us see.
You You're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me.
Amen.
Beautiful as always. So what at Northstar, what we talk about most of the time is our belief is that addiction is caused by abandonment and trauma. That's the starting point for addiction. And so as the group was singing that beautiful song, for you that have been abandoned, for you that have been traumatized in your life, it's okay. You can connect to God, you can bow down to God, you can worship God. He is here for you. He is not going to harm you. But when we've been traumatized and abandoned, that's not what we think. Our first thoughts is everybody's going to get us, everybody's going to harm us, all those things. So just if you're out there listening to this, I hope that you'll understand that is not God. God loves you. God is He's never abandoned you. Never. Even though it may feel like it at times. So I hope you hear that. And so just again, so grateful for the singers and the musicians and the technicians here to make this happen. It just really tells us again about our commitment to recovery, because recovery is so important. You know, when you hear the statistics about 1 in 3 Americans are addicted to something that's going to require intervention to overcome, I think we can say this is a wide open mission field, and that's why we're here. So last couple of weeks we've been talking about the submarine commander, and we're going to continue to do that. So today the name of our title is Taking Command of Our Submarine. And so again, real quick, so I can kind of cover this again, what the submarine commander has. It's an analogy for us about how our brains operate. So as children or as adults, when we have been traumatized or when we've been abandoned, our brain begins to organize itself around surviving. So when you're organized around surviving, you're not going to thrive. You're not going to have that purpose in your life that just really makes you excited about life. You're not going to have hobbies. You're not going to have healthy relationships. You're going to be surviving. And not only are you surviving, your brain, that's what it's there for. In the brain's view, it's doing exactly what it should be doing. It is protecting you. Makes sense, right? Kind of hard to get on, though, when you're surviving. That's all you're doing. So then we say, so you come to some crazy place like Northstar or AA or wherever, and we say to you, you got to start letting go of this, and you got to start moving forward. You got to start looking at ways to live your life again. Our organized around survival brains are not going to say, oh, that's a great idea. It's absolutely going to try to fight you every step of the way. And that's why we're here, to help us start to see this. And I was thinking as the singers were singing today, it was a beautiful song, but when I've been traumatized and abandoned, it's really hard to connect and to come somewhere and worship or to be around other people, because everybody's going to hurt me. That's my assumption. When I've been abandoned and traumatized, like some of us I know, pretty hard to trust people, pretty hard to believe that. And so I hope as we continue to talk here, you'll start to see maybe there's a chance you can start letting up just a little bit. Just a little bit. And we're going to be talking about Luke 15 today, and that is where God never stops looking for us. And it's such a beautiful thing. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about the tenets of Northstar just a little bit, so again, you can hear those. We can never say these too many times. And so the first thing is we organize our what we call addictive behaviors, or you'll hear me say 3 things: hurts, habits, and hang-ups, addiction, and attachments. They're all the same thing, just said differently. The problem when we use addiction, we kind of tend to go down a path of substance abuse only. And there's much more. In fact, it's one of 3. So what in Northstar, we organize our addictions around substances, which again, we all know that one: alcohol, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, you name it. some people just become physically addicted to that. The other one is compulsive behaviors. That can be as simple as being on Facebook for 7 hours a day. It can be looking at pornography. It can be gambling. I mean, we can go down the gamut. Shopping, again, like I don't know about you, but my household gets a lot of Amazon packages. And so they're out. So it's just easy. What we're doing is habitual behavior to avoid pain. So as long as we can manage that, as long as it doesn't become compulsive, as long as it doesn't take over our lives, as long as you got the money in your account, keep ordering from Amazon. But when we start doing it because it's filling a need for us that we can't fill, we got this deep, dark hole in us that we're trying to overcome or we're trying to avoid it, then that's when we get in trouble. All right, and then the third one is people. We become addicted to people. We either try to control people or we try to give ourselves up all the time so that people will love us. It doesn't work. But we think it does. And we try and we try and we try. So being addicted to someone is far different than being in love with someone. And those are two different subjects. And that's what we try to help us understand here. So first thing is substances, compulsive behaviors, and people are the three things that we look at. The next thing is we believe everybody has hurts, habits, and hang-ups. Every one of us has got something. I wish we didn't, but we do. The next thing is that we see addiction as a disease. And that's really positive here because one of the things that happens when we become addicted is that shame drives us. We come to loathe ourselves. We come to hate what we've done. We hate what we're doing to people, all those things. And so we have a lot of shame in our lives. And so when we say that addiction or hurts, habits, and hang-ups is a disease, then that also says then that we're going to take a medical approach to it. We're not going to fix this with willpower. It doesn't work. All willpower does is creates more shame in us. But instead what we say is there's a treatment modality for addiction, and that is you have to talk to people. You have to attend support groups. You have to stop. You have to look at what's driving these things. Sometimes medication works. I'm not a huge proponent of them, but in the short term they do work, as long as you don't stay on them forever. The next thing is that we believe is that addiction is a no-fault disease. Again, we're trying to attack the shame piece. Nobody set out to be addicted. I've never met any addict who said to me their goal was to become addicted. Never happened. It's a no-fault disease. But with that said, it's our responsibility to recover. It's our job to do the right things to recover, overcome our shame, overcome the pain in our lives, our trauma, our abandonment, and find a life that's worth living and a life that's rich, full, and meaningful. One of the other things that we believe is that addictive processes and substances are more readily available today and unfortunately are much more effective. We can synthesize chemicals better today than we ever have been, and we're going to get better at it, and it's going to destroy more of our lives. But at the same time, I can now jump on the internet and I can find any of the dysfunctional compulsive behaviors I'm looking for. I can probably find it there. No shame involved with anybody seeing me. Lots of shame internally. But at least I don't have to go to the drugstore to buy pornography now, right? For you guys a little bit older, you remember not that any of us ever did that, of course, but we had to go in and we'd have to stand in front of a clerk to pay for the thing, right? Well, that was kind of tough. So we don't have to do that now. And gambling, like I said, with gambling, has always surprised me. I always thought gambling was, people in groups throwing the dice and everybody yelling, hollering. Most gamblers will tell you, oh, no. Being at home by yourself online is just awesome for gambling. And I know many people have destroyed their lives there. So that's our next one. And then the other things we do is that we believe that, again, we're talking about this trauma and abandonment or what drive the issues. Now, here's the good stuff. We believe that our brains have an amazing capacity to heal. It's called brain plasticity. Our brains really are very good at recovery. We can heal from most of the damage we do with addiction. And don't think, I know, again, we kind of think about substances as being damaging to us physically, but when we're involved in compulsive behaviors, when we're addicted to people and we're in dysfunctional relationships, our brain actually contracts physically. So what happens if we do things well? Our brain expands. You get the point. So it's a cutting edge both ways on brain plasticity, but if we do the right things, if we work on recovery, if we do those things, our brain will recover. And of course, the best of all is we have a Lord and Savior who has an amazing capacity to love, and that's called grace. So that's our tenets at Northstar. These are such positive tenets. We believe that we can all recover. We believe that everyone can find that life that they dream of and wish for. I always like this quote. I'm going to read this, and I think it'll be on our line here. Yeah. So this is by Nora Volkow, and she's the director of National Institute of Drug Abuse. And her quote is just so good. She goes, "How can we comprehend the concept of a person who wants to stop doing something but cannot, despite the catastrophic consequences? We're not speaking of little consequences. These are catastrophic consequences, and yet they cannot control their behavior." So any of us in recovery, we know exactly what we're talking about. No matter how painful it is to us, no matter how much damage we're doing, until we can get a hold of what's driving our pain and our misery, we're going to continue to do that, no matter what the catastrophic consequences are. And that's why we're here. And so back to the submarine commander. The submarine commander tells us, stay safe, and I do not understand time. I do not understand reality. What I do understand is what you tell me. So, as a submarine commander, I'm sitting here, and this darn song comes on from 20 years ago when I was in a wildly abusive relationship, and I start feeling agitated. I start feeling angry. I start feeling scared. I'm not in danger right now. I'm actually pretty safe. That's what the submarine commander does to us, and that's why we got to figure out ways to get control of that. When I work with couples, sometimes I get them to use the submarine commander language, and they tell me how it helps. They'll say, "I think you're DEFCON 2 right now." And sometimes that wakes us up to realize that, hey, you know what? It isn't real. It's not. I'm not in danger right now, but I think I am. You know, I've known people. I knew a woman who was sexually assaulted in a white utility van. Well, guess what? There's just a few white utility vans around, right? So pulls up to a stoplight. White van pulls up, stoplight beside her. Starts getting the agitation, start feeling the fear, start feeling the terror. It's not real. She's not in danger. Submarine commander doesn't know that because you're feeding your brain cortisol and adrenaline, and so the brain thinks you're in danger. So these are, if you can start realizing these things, you can start managing some of the triggers, and you can move forward because triggers are very destructive for moving forward. So anyway, so when you hear us talk about the submarine commander, that's what we're talking about. Managing the organized brain, giving it permission to move forward. So today we're going to talk about the next wonderful subject in all this, and that's abandonment. So abandonment, it's kind of one of those things, is abandonment bigger than trauma? Is trauma abandonment and blah, blah, blah? Trauma definitely is a subset of abandonment. Trauma definitely leads to abandonment, so you kind of see it either way. But abandonment is huge. It just drives us to loathe ourselves, to hate ourselves, and all that stuff. And so that's why I selected Luke 15, because it's about God never stops looking. He never stops looking for us. He never, ever stops loving us. And so probably the most famous parable of all is the prodigal son, and I'm going to read that today. But before we do that, I love how the Message does this on the first part of Luke 15, and I'll read it. He goes, so this is how Luke 15 opens, and I think for all of us in recovery, we respond to this, we relate to this. So this is what the Message says. By this time, a lot of men and women of doubtful reputation, don't you love that? Those women and men of doubtful reputation, which in effect really is probably talking about all of us, right? So by this time, a lot of men and women of doubtful reputation were hanging around Jesus, listening intently. They loved what he was saying. They responded to him. So guess who wasn't like this? The Pharisees. The Pharisees and religion scholars were not pleased. They growled, "He takes in sinners and eats meals with them," treating them like old friends. Their grumbling triggered his stories. Isn't that funny, though, to hear that? And I like what Philip Yancey said about why is it in the Bible that the people of doubtful reputation, the people who were struggling with life, the people who were hurt and harmed, why did they respond so much to Jesus? And while at the same time, why did so many of the religious people respond so negatively toward Jesus? But isn't that the beauty of Christ, is his love? his unending love for us. And it just, I hope that as we hear this, because with abandonment, we actually believe that people do not love us. I mean, we believe that no one could possibly care for us, and we do lots of things to harm ourselves. So let me go ahead and read Luke 15, the prodigal son. And I do apologize, a little bit of reading here, but it's such a great story. Then he said, there once was a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, Father, I want right now what's coming to me. None of us in our impulsive, addictive thinking has ever done this one, right? Yeah. So the father divided the property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son said to his father, Father, I want right now what's coming to me. And so the father divided the property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country. There, undisciplined and dissipated, he wasted everything he had. After he had gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all through the country, and he began to hurt. So things weren't going quite as well as he hoped there, right? And he was so hungry he would have eaten the corn cobs in the pig slop, but no one would give him any. And so he that brought him to his senses. He said, all those farmhands are working on my father, sit down to 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. So this is not going quite as planned for him, right? I'm going back to my father. I'm going to say to him, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your friend, your son, and take me on as a hired hand. He got right up and went home to his father. All right? So I hope some of us have done this, right? When we've pretty much screwed our lives up and we're pretty desperate. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him, his heart pounding. He ran out, embraced him, and kissed him. The son started his speech. Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. But the father wasn't listening. He was calling to the servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then get a grain-fed heifer and roast it. We're going to have a feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here. Given up for dead and now alive, given up for lost and now found. And they began to have a wonderful time. They sound pretty good, right? But of course, you know, family dynamics always got to kick in, right? And all this time, his older son was out in the field. When the day's work was done, he came in. As he approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. Calling over one of the houseboys, he asked, what was going on here? He told him, your brother came home. Your father has ordered a feast, barbecued beef, because he has him home safe and sound. The older brother stalked off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. Sounds like families again, doesn't it? His father came out and tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. The son said, look, how many years I've stayed here serving you, never given you a moment of grief, never happy, miserable. Oh, no, that's not part in there. Sorry. Put that in there, right? Never one moment of grief. I did everything you were supposed to do. Have you ever thrown a party for me and my friends? Then this son of yours, not his brother, by the way, but then his son of yours has thrown away your money on whores, shows up, and you all go out with a feast. His father said, son, you don't understand. You're with me all the time, and everything that is mine is yours. But this is a wonderful time, and we had to celebrate. This brother of yours was dead, and he's alive. He was lost, and he's found. God never stops looking, never starts loving, is always joyous for us to come back. So friends that are really struggling with addiction issues, and we've harmed many people because when we're in our addictive modes, we do cause lots of damage. We cause lots of problems. God will never, ever leave you. And this leads us to abandonment. God will never, ever abandon you. Because you know what? A lot of us have felt abandonment. A lot of us know abandonment. A lot of us know the pain of abandonment. In fact, I read a quote where fear of abandonment is among the most anxiety-provoking situations in childhood. Now, let me say this. You can be abandoned in adulthood, so make sure you hear that. But a lot of it happens when we're children. So when we have abandonment, it makes us fearful to form satisfying relationships. It creates issues in us not handling or coping with stress and hardships in life. And along comes that wonderful term PTSD. PTSD comes and visits us. So when we think about this, when we think about abandonment, what happens is a lot of times is that we don't learn how to take care of our lives. And we certainly don't see ourselves in the right light when we have been abandoned. So if we go down a path, which I do believe, that I heard this, I went to a conference a long time ago when I was a juvenile probation officer. This awesome speaker, I wish I could remember his name, said that 92% of our behavior is a result of our behavior as adults is a result of our childhood. Well, I absolutely believe that. Now, that doesn't mean you're not responsible. It doesn't mean that once we become adults that we can blame our parents for everything, because that doesn't work very well. Because we got to be adults, and we got to recover. But the fact is that when we're abandoned and traumatized, we do not know how to take care of ourselves because nobody taught us how, right? So the good news is a lot of people, they did a study, they did a long-term study, 62% of us had what they would call positive parenting, the ability to do these things. So that leaves about 38% of us with other issues, right? And so when we look at abandonment, then we kind of look at some of the things that, like, when they were looking at abused and abandoned children, what happened was that children began to learn that pleading, crying, and being fearful didn't stop anything. There's no one there to deliver. And so they were conditioned to give up. So that's one set of kids. Another one was that, and then the other part, of course, is that if we have the right types of attachment, we learn how to do that. So we're going to look at 4 different organized attachments here. So the first is 62% were secure, 15% were avoidant, 9% anxious, 15% disorganized. How does that sound? Isn't that like fun? Right. So the avoidant kids, whose parents were avoidant, was that they were the type, I don't know if you've known any children that kind of flat affect, they don't really say, they just don't really react, right? And so when the mother they did these studies where the very small children, infants to like 2 or 3 years old, the mother would leave, an avoidant mother would leave, and the child would just sit there and show no alarm, no anything, but yet their heart rates increased, and they had constant states of anxiety. They just hid it. And then you have the children of anxious parents, and just so you understand, if you're an anxious child, you're going to be an anxious adult. I can almost talk today, right? And so when an anxious parent would leave the room, of course, the child would become very anxious and very disturbed and be very scared and all those things, right? And then we have the disorganized. And this one I really want to spend time on. So the disorganized parent, and I hate to do this to you moms out there, but we're going to talk about mothers. So I always look at this 2 ways. You guys do get blamed for a lot of things, but think of it this way. It tells you how powerful you are. It tells you how powerful your love is for your children. And so when they did this research, they were showing, 62% of parents do, and when they said this criteria, it's not funny, but it kind of, they said that you were good enough. Right? So the criteria wasn't all that heavy here. It's just that you were a good enough parent that you can meet your children's needs, right? Well, the disorganized parents, they tended to be preoccupied, right? And so the preoccupied mother tended to be intrusive, hostile, and rejecting, right? So, for instance, they were telling about this one mother. They were doing some film studies, and this mother was with her infant child, and she just would like get in its face, get really close in its face, or would be picking it up. And the child didn't want that at that moment, just was unable to see that, just was intrusive on the child. And the problem was, then the other part of the problem was with intrusive parents was that they wanted the child to meet their needs. And that's one I see a lot of problems with, is when we have parents out there who are waiting on the children to meet their needs. Because our job as healthy parents, or good enough parents, is that we want our children to be healthy, happy, and whole, right? But these parents didn't do that. They expected the child to meet their needs to make them happy, right? The other parents were the helpless and fragile mothers. And so they seemed very sweet and kind, but were very fragile, and they really had no way to know what it was like to really be an adult with kids. They didn't know how to do that very well. And they wanted their children to comfort them. So you see how it's flipped and how it creates so many problems. And that's what creates so much abandonment, is when the parents put upon their children all the hurts, habits, and hang-ups of their lives. So the results of being the child of disorganized parents was that you had an unstable sense of yourself. You didn't know who you were, who you should be. You tended to be impulsive as adults. You had intense anger and resentment issues. And a lot of people had recurrent suicidal ideation. So, trust me, abandonment's huge. But you know what was interesting was, with all these studies, was the hostile intrusives were not the most destructive of the mothers. The most destructive of the mothers were the ones that emotionally withdrew from their children. Those are the ones that were the most destructive. The ones that had emotional distance, the role reversal we talked about, they were dealing with so many of their own issues, they weren't able to reach out and respond to their children, and so they withdrew emotionally from their children, and that's one that created most of our problems. Makes sense if you think about it, because it's ongoing. We talk about in trauma, we talk about how one of the biggest problems we have is when we feel like we can't get away from the pain. Well, that's what this one is. So when you're abandoned in childhood, you're lost, you're overwhelmed, you're disconnected, you see yourself as unlovable, you feel empty, you feel helpless, and you feel trapped and weighed down. Other than that, you're doing pretty good, right? So you again can feel and hear the pain of the traumatized brain and how it does that. Or the other things we might see is chronic feelings of insecurity, loss of control and isolation. How about chronic depression, chronic anxiety, obsessive thinking? All these things come from us when we're abandoned. And then what do we see with these behaviors? We see us attaching too quickly to people. Particularly, I hate to say this again, but research shows that women tend to do this a little bit more. We attach too quickly to dysfunctional people when we've had abandonment issues. We fail to fully commit, and so we never have really strong relationships. Our porcupine index jumps out and keeps people away from us. We work so hard, we aim to please, when in the fact is all we're doing is in dysfunctional relationships that are destroying us. Other things we might do is we might stay in relationships no matter how unhealthy they are. All these kind of things. We become jealous of people who are successful. We envy them. We don't like, and what all gets back to again is we don't like ourselves. We become very hypersensitive and critical of us. So what do we do about all this abandonment issues? I wish I could say, boom, we can fix it right now, right here. It's not how it works. But what we have to do is awareness. We have to believe a couple things here. One, we have to believe in a God who loves us so much, he will never abandon us no matter what. We have to believe that. The second thing is we have to believe that not everyone out there is bad, because it's easy to do with abandonment. It's easy to think about that everybody's going to hurt me. We have to accept the fact that we cannot turn the clock back. I wish we could. I wish you could turn that clock back and fix your life and make it perfect. But it wouldn't be you anymore. Then it wouldn't be you. And that's the beauty of recovery, is understanding that. So we can't turn the clock back. We have a God who loves us, will never leave us. The prodigal son tells us that beautifully, about how God is always here. God will celebrate he celebrates you every day. He loves you. And he will never stop looking for you. But we have to find ways to become aware of what we're doing that's destroying our lives because of our abandonment. And one of the ways we can do that, I know it probably sounds like an old record, but we have to live with intentional gratitude. We have to find ways to be grateful. We need to be grateful for our abandonment issues so we can fix them. If we can take our abandonment issues and turn them for us a little bit, they can become gifts to us later. Because our real goal is to have a rich, full, meaningful life where we connect with God, with others. We actually feel joy, satisfaction in our lives. And we can't have that as long as we're letting abandonment overwhelm us. So many of us have issues. There's going to be a whole bunch of us after us are going to have abandonment issues. There's been a whole bunch of us before us with abandonment issues. These can be fixed. If you're here watching this, at least you're listening enough to know that you can become aware of this and start doing something about it. There are people out there. Northstar, places like that, what we talk about all the time, helping us overcome that abandonment and that trauma so we can move on. And then maybe we can find ways to create a real purpose in our life instead of surviving, instead of just getting by. And maybe we can come undo all those things. And so I'm going to close the day with Matthew 10. And this is Jesus again talking about how special we are. He goes, what's the price of a pet canary? Some loose change, right? And God cares what happens to it even more than you do. He pays even greater attention to you down to the last detail, even numbering the hairs on your head. So don't be intimidated by all this bully talk. You're worth more than 1,000,000 canaries. So we joke about that in Northstar. We go, you are worth more than 1,000,000 canaries. But I hope we're hearing this. Christ loves you. You are so important. You are much more than you see as yourself. Abandonment takes away the ability to love yourself. It takes away your abilities to see yourself in a positive light. And I hope, again, we'll hear us. You're worth more than 1,000,000 canaries, and I hope we can leave on that today. So let's close with the prayer of serenity. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. So again, if this has touched you in any way, the abandonment, find somebody to talk to. Find ways to become aware so you can overcome this and live a rich, full, meaningful life. Thank you for joining.